Hey guys, we are back. It is Angela Smith of the AnJaNell Online Sewing University, where we help you to master the basics, build your skill set and confidence, and create some of the hottest trends. And we're doing it all virtually. All right, so this is part 3 of my introduction to draping course. All right, so we're going to get straight into it. Very first thing, before we remove this off of our mannequin, you guys, you have to have a clear idea of how you're going to finish up the top. Keep in mind, draping is about you actually creating the bodice on the mannequin. But again, all of the finishes are up to you, and those can be done outside of the mannequin, okay? So keep that in mind. And what I mean by the finishes is what we talked about in the previous videos. If you want to hem this, you need to make sure you added seam allowance to this. If not, let's say you decided later that you want to hem this. What you want to do is take your pen or your pencil and just write on your muslin, add 1 inch for seam allowance, okay? And that way, when you lay it on your fabric, you know before you cut to go in and add 1 inch of seam allowance. Over here, you already added the seam allowance if you're doing it like I did. So you don't have to add anything else. Same thing up here. You have the seam allowance. If we go to the back, the exact same thing, because as you guys see, I didn't add any seam allowance. So it's a matter of how do I want to finish this up. Now, as for me, I'll tell you what I came up with. Because another thing that you have to keep in mind with draping, okay, try not to be so hard on yourself. Try not to be so particular. This is in the fashion world, what it would be in the music world, what I call freestyling. Because you literally are freestyling your garment. You're going with the flow. If you mess up in an area, you can easily fix that. You can go back and fix that later. So you're freestyling your garment, you guys, and that's perfectly fine. What I personally decided that I'm going to do for the front, I'm going to leave this cut. I'm just going to use bias tape. So what that means is my cut is going to look exactly like this. The same amount of cleavage will be out, the same low cut. Another thing, I know I told you guys that you can do it on fold and you can make a little mark and you can put a little seam in here if you wanted to. Again, that is completely up to you. What I'm personally going to do, I'm going to do 4 individual pieces, okay? 2 of these, right? 2 for the front and 2 for the back. And what I'm going to do, instead of putting them on fold and having a seam in the front and in the back, I'm just going to slightly overlap them down here at the bottom. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. Before we take this off, again, pause this video and do all of your markings, because what you don't want to happen is you pull this off of the mannequin and then you're wondering to yourself, okay, where's my armhole? Where's my shoulder? How is this cut? You see what I'm saying? You may confuse yourself. I did that a lot when I was in fashion school. So do as many markings as you can. Keep in mind, this is your pattern. So do what you need to do for you to remember and to make this easier for you. If you want to write waist down here because this is your waistline, do that. If you want to write side seam over here, do that. Armhole, shoulder, front cut, okay? Dart. Don't forget you made your markings, okay? So let's go ahead and take this off of the mannequin, and I am going to put the pieces on my real fabric. Okay, guys, so I have some fabric here, and I forgot to hit you guys with a pop quiz, so I'm actually going to do that right now. Looking at the style of this top, okay? We didn't add any type of allowance for a zipper, any hooks, any buttons. So what type of material do you think we need to execute this garment successfully without having to make a whole bunch of alterations? Okay, do you think a stretchy fabric? Do you think something like a cotton that has absolutely no give? Or do you think either would be fine? Okay, and I'll give you the correct answer. You need something stretchy. Keep in mind, in the first part of the lesson, I explained to you, you have to keep this in mind, okay? How are you going to get in and out of your garment? If there's not any buttons, hooks, or zippers, that's almost always an indication that it needs to be something stretchy. You cannot pull a non-stretchy top that's not executed like perfectly over your head. You're not going to be able to put the garment on, okay? Let alone take the garment off if you are able to get it on without it ripping. So you want to make sure for this type of top, you have a stretchy fabric, okay? So I have about 2.5 yards. I already have this green, vibrant green fabric in my stash. What you're going to need is your fabric. You're going to need your patterns. And as you can see, I went through and I labeled. I put front, shoulder, side seam, waistline, all of that on here. So you need your front and back pattern. You're going to need pins, of course. You're going to need your measuring tape. I never do a video without my measuring tape. You're going to need that tracing wheel that I told you about before. I always have a seam ripper in case I make mistakes. And, of course, you need your scissors. I always have a big pair and a small pair just because, okay? All right, so let's get into it. Again, for my top, I am going to do 4 individual pieces. So I'm going to do 2 of the front and I'm going to do 2 of the back. I already have my fabric on fold. This is my fold line over here. So for the person who says, no, I don't want 4 individual pieces, I just want 2 pieces, okay? And you want to do that small seam. What you'll do, keep in mind, this was the front, okay? I have it upside down, but this was the front. You're going to put it close to the fold line. Keep in mind, your shoulder already had allowance, so you could take this all the way up, okay? And what you're going to do is just that small 1.5 inch, you're going to put up to the fold. Then you're going to pull the rest of it, and that's how you're going to cut that. It's going to be connected here for your 1 inch, okay? And then all of this is going to be open. So when you unfold this, after you cut it, this one area, again, is on fold. You're going to have one piece, and you're going to see a perfect V, all right? Again, that's not what I'm doing. What you should always look for, you guys, when you're laying out your patterns, especially if you're new, you want to preserve as much fabric as possible. So you're not going to take your pattern and just start cutting in the middle, right? And then you have to throw away or stash all of the rest. No, you want to make sure you're preserving as much fabric as possible. Can you see the end of my table? Yes. All right. So this is a very straight cut already right here. Then we have our fold lines. So the way that I'm going to lay mine, okay, I'm going to lay my front here. As you can see, we use the straightest line to start draping this top. You're going to do the exact same thing when you're laying your fabric, okay? So I have my front piece kind of like that, and you always want to play around with it before you start cutting. For this one, if I need another very straight line, there's a couple of different things that I can do. I can turn it. I want to make sure you guys can see this. I can turn it and use the straightest seam over here, because this one is extremely straight. Because it's really stretchy, it rolls up a little bit right here. That can be ironed out, or you can use that to your advantage, because even if it rolls up, it's still completely straight. So I could lay my back piece like this if I wanted to. Move that so y'all can see it. Okay, so I could just lay it here if I wanted to, okay? So you want to find the best area with the straightest seams, and that's where you want to start cutting, okay? So let's start with the front piece. I don't want to have to keep maneuvering, y'all. I don't have a rotating camera at the moment. So I'm going to move my front piece up a little bit. to give me more room down here at the bottom, because don't forget, when I was draping, I accidentally cut my back piece a little bit too short. So this is my opportunity to now straighten that up. So let's get into it. I have this down, and you don't want to ever just start cutting, you guys. You really have to think about this if you want to avoid mistakes. And I'm really trying my best to help you avoid any type of mistake. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pin my pattern down. Okay. I'm going to take my tracing wheel. You remember when I said you need to make your markings for your dart? And keep in mind also, this fabric, I have it laying down right sides together. You almost always are going to do right sides together, okay? I should have ironed my muslin pattern, but that's okay. All right, so I'm going to take my tracing wheel. And instead of just trying to make marks with chalk or pen, because that's not professional, you're going to use your tracing wheel, push down in here, and we're just running over that dart. All the way to the point. What that does, if you can see that, there is little bitty holes in here, and that's going to remind me when I get on my sewing machine to sew my dart together. Okay? All right, so another thing that I am going to do, now typically I have a ruler down here, but I did not bring my ruler. If you remember, I ended up cutting my front piece a little bit too short down at the waistline. So what I'm going to do, I don't have my ruler, but I have my notebook. I'm going to take my notebook, and I'm just going to line this up, and I'm going to use my tracing wheel to straighten out my seam. Now, I didn't cut it that short, but this is at least straightening it up, and I can actually make other adjustments when it's time for me to sew. If it's more easier for you, you can even go around your entire garment with your tracing wheel. This will tell you exactly where to cut when it's time for you to cut, okay? And we're almost to the point of cutting this out. Keep in mind, again, you need 2 pieces for your front. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get that cut out, and then we can do the back piece. All right, so front piece is all cut out. So this is how I like to do mine. Keep the pattern on top. You have your fabric on back. Sit that aside. Let's move on to the back piece, okay? Because you guys couldn't really see when I was working with this edge because of my camera angle. So I'm going to maneuver my fabric. I'm going to slide it over so that you can see it this time, okay? So I'm going to move that over. Again, because this is a really stretchy fabric, it rolls up sometimes. That can be pretty aggravating, especially if you're new. You could typically see that before you buy the fabric on the bolt. If you want to completely avoid this edge, do that. If you're not as bothered by it, then you can use this, okay? Again, we want to preserve as much fabric as possible. If I can figure out a way to put my back pattern here, I still have all of this fabric left. And, you know, there may even be enough for another project later down the line. So keep that in mind. What I'm going to do is use the edge that rolls, but instead of trying to unravel it or trying to iron it out, what I'm going to do, again, you can use this roll to your advantage because it's still extremely straight. What I'm going to do is just line my back piece up. Okay, keep in mind, you already had allowance in your shoulder, so you can definitely put that all the way up to the top. As long as your fabric is completely even, you don't need any allowance around your armhole. You don't need any allowance around your side seam. It's already there. Another thing, don't forget, we made 2 different markings, you guys, as well. I used pink chalk to show the actual side seam, And then what you see on this side is the allowance. So when you're taking your tracing wheel, you also want to go around that line as well. I forgot to mention that in the last clip. Okay, so I have this completely lined up. Again, I'm doing separate pieces. I'm not doing anything on fold. And this one was a little bit short as well. So what I'm going to do, but it was diagonal, okay? Because keep in mind, the top is diagonal. You're going to shift this. But what I am going to do is I'm just going to add just a tad bit of allowance in there before I cut. So what I'm going to do, I'm not even going to like measure it or anything. I'm literally just going to take my notebook and give myself more allowance. And I'm using my notebook, again, because I don't have a ruler. But the only thing I need it for is not for a measurement. It's just so that I have a straight edge, okay? And it's completely even. And my notebook is exactly that. So you're going to do the exact same thing. Again, take your tracing wheel and go around the actual side seam, and then take your tracing wheel, go all the way around. I actually did some of that before restarting this video, guys, so I'm not skipping a step, I promise. And then we're just going to go ahead and cut. So you're doing the exact same thing. You're cutting all the way around. Now, again, I cannot reiterate this enough. If you're going to hem the front and back of the garment where the very low cut is, make sure you add 1 inch or 1.5, whatever you're most comfortable with. I usually only do 1 inch seam allowance. Make sure you add that 1 inch before you start cutting. I, again, am going to use a bias tape to finish up my garment, so I don't have to add any allowance. The cut that you saw on the mannequin is going to be my exact cut for this blouse. So I'm going to get this cut out. Another thing that I decided to do, because again, guys, and I don't want you to feel any type of way about me repeating myself, is just that sometimes I know how easy it is to forget things. Sometimes I talk a little bit fast, and I want to make sure that you're truly understanding to, again, avoid making really big mistakes. What I'm going to do to finish up my garment as well, I didn't say this in the beginning of the video, I decided that I wanted to add a really long, what looks kind of like a tie. And it's going to hang down the side of the garment. And this is going to be at the waistline. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that out as well. All it is pretty much a very long rectangular strip of fabric that I'm going to sew up and hem and add to the bottom, and it can kind of tie at the bottom. It's going to be really cute. I'll show you that in case you want to do something similar. If not, the bottom of your garment, you can finish it up by hemming it just like you would any other garment. So keep in mind, all of the finishing touches are completely up to you. I'm just here to teach you how to drape and then give you some creative ideas. But again, you're freestyling this top. So you're able to do whatever your creative mind tells you to do. That's what I love about fashion design. So I'm going to get this cut out. I'm going to get my attachment cut out as well. I already have my bias tape trim. I actually made that by hand. I'll show that to you as well. And then we'll get started on sewing this top together. All right, so this is what we have. This is the tie that I was telling you about that I decided to put at the bottom of this garment. I have my front patterns. I have my back patterns already ready. And then I have this bias tape, also known as trim, that I'm going to use to trim the front part of the garment that I keep talking about, you guys. I made this by hand using African print. If you remember in a previous lesson, I did teach you how to make this. All I literally did was I opened it up. I pretty much cut strips of fabric. Let me grab my measuring tape for you guys so I can tell you exactly the measurement. This is exactly 2 inches. Okay, I folded that in half, ironed it, fold both of those sides in half, and this is what I have. This is exactly how the bias tape look when you buy it in the packet. It's just like this, except for a lot of times it comes in only solid colors and sometimes some metallic colors, okay? So I made really long strips using African prints that I knew could cover the front of the garment. So now it's time to get sewing, okay? Again, if, I have to keep saying if, because during this draping lesson, you're free to be creative. If you're doing the garment exactly how I am doing the garment, your first step is going to be to do your trim first. If you're hemming your garment, do your hem first. And it's only going to be on the front and back, that low V cut that we have. You're going to go ahead and put your trim on it, okay? So on my back pieces, okay, again, the right sides are together. So, for example, on my back piece, okay, where my V cut is, I'm going to literally just go in. I'm going to serge all 4 pieces, and then I am going to just sandwich my fabric in there. I'm going to pin it first. I always like to pin it first. If you're experienced, you don't have to pin it. You can just do this part as you go on the sewing machine. But a lot of times it'll just save you way more time if you go ahead and pin it on the front end, because you can go much, much faster. So I'm going to put that trim on the front pieces of all of my 4 pieces. Then I'm going to just pretty much overlap my 2 pieces. Very, very small overlap. That's going to be my back. I'm going to do the same thing on my front, and I'll show you guys step by step. All right, guys, so this is what I had before I got in there and just started on my sewing machine. I wanted to show you guys how it looks all laid out with my trim on it before I start sewing. So this is my front. I was able to see those faint lines really, really well from the tracing wheel, okay? Just keep in mind, you're just going to fold it down, and you are literally going to pin and then just sew just like it was looking on the mannequin, okay? It's going to have like a triangular shape. So I'm literally going to fold my garment, and I am going to stitch my darts in there. You're going to see a seam, okay? And you see how that seam, when you get that dart in there, it's going to straighten up your side seam, just like I told you when I was draping on the mannequin. So this is what the front is going to look like. And then these are my back pieces. And this is what my back is going to look like. If we literally overlap them, because that's what I decided that I'm going to do. I'm not going to put a seam at the bottom. I'm just going to overlap them. When I overlap these 2 pieces, this is what it's going to look like. Okay? Same thing with my back. If I sit these aside, when I stitch these together, my back piece is going to look exactly as it did on the mannequin, except for there's no raw cut. It's going to be fully finished. You see how it ravels up a little bit up here at the top? That's because it's a stretchy fabric. It's also because I only have it pinned. We're going to take our iron. We're going to iron that out, get it super straight. And it's going to look, again, just like it did on the mannequin. I was toying around with if I wanted to add sleeves to the garment, which I am really highly considering, like a really fitted long sleeve. You can see my previous courses for how to create a sleeve and how to attach it. But I am playing with that idea. But I just wanted to show you this. And I cut out the long tie that I was telling you about that I'm going to add to the bottom of the garment. As I stated, it's really just a long rectangular piece. I put my pins in here to let me know that this area I'm going to actually sew together. So I put pins in there, and I want it to be extremely long. This is actually about the entire length of my measuring tape. I went with 60 inches by 5 inches. So I have that cut out. And let's go ahead and sew and put this together. So now I'm just going to sew on the trim on all 4 of my pieces. As far as the overlapping, I'll show you that as well. Let me see. Okay. With my 2 back pieces, what you can do, you can either overlap them slightly and just do a stitch. It's not going to really matter because it's going to be covered up. You can either do a stitch, or after you sew your trim, you could just put a pin in here to let you know that those 2 pieces are going to overlap. You don't necessarily have to stitch them together, but you know, you can. So let's get on the sewing machine. Let's get sewing. Another thing, after we attach our trim, we're going to put the front on top of the back, just like we do with any other top. We're going to go ahead and get our side seams and our shoulder seams attached. Then we're going to hem the sleeve, okay? It's going to be a full circle. You're going to hem that, and then you're almost finished with your garment. So let's get into it. All right, so this is what it looks like with the trim sewn on. Beautiful, right? I just put a pin down here in a very, very small section where my front is going to overlap. You guys, at any time, if you're second guessing yourself, you can always throw this back on the mannequin and see if it looks like how you draped it with the muslin, okay? So keep that in mind. I have my back pieces turned right sides down because what are we going to do? Right sides together. Let's go ahead and attach our front and our back. We're going to connect it at the side seam, and we're going to connect it at the shoulder. Keep in mind, you had your tracing wheel to where you should know exactly where you're going to sew. We always add 1 inch of seam allowance. So if you can no longer see that faint line from your tracing wheel, then what I want you to do is just take your measuring tape and you can make little marks at 1 inch so that you are sewing exactly 1 inch for your seam allowance, okay? Don't forget with your dart should be facing down. Your dart should be facing down. And I'll show you as soon as I get this pinned what that looks like, okay? So we're putting our side seams together. I'm not worried at all about the fact that my front piece is a little bit longer than the back, because don't forget I added allowance to my front piece where I cut it a little short and I just estimated. All right, so we have that pinned together. Let's get our shoulder seams. The exact same thing, you guys. You'll be sewing at 1 inch. So I'm just putting my pins in here to get it all aligned. And then you can make a 1 inch mark if you cannot see the mark from your tracing wheel. All right. Everything should line up pretty perfectly because of the pattern. Okay. Keep in mind, your armhole is a complete circle. Let me turn this over so that you can see my dart. The dart is facing down. Okay. It's facing downward. And that's what you always want to do. With darts, you want to face them down. If they're on like pants or shorts or bottom, you want to make sure your dart is always pointing towards the back of the garment opposed to pointing towards the front. In this case, you want to make sure your dart is facing downward. And all you literally have to do is just flip it down. Okay, and you can iron it if it's not cooperating with you. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. Line up my side seams, line up my shoulder seams, and now all we're literally doing is we're going to stitch this again, 1 inch seam allowance. So your stitch is going to be about here. Same thing for your side seams, okay? You're going 1 inch in. Go ahead and sew your side seams together, sew your shoulders together, and this could actually be the end for some people. You're going to hem your sleeves, and you know how to hem. Fold down once, fold down twice. I always do it double. And then you can hem the bottom of your garment. Same way. Flip it up once, flip it up twice, go ahead and stitch it all together. But again, for my type of garment, I'm going to add a nice little tie at the bottom. So I will show you that. All right, so here's what we have, you guys. Does this not look exactly like what we draped with muslin on the mannequin at the beginning of this course, right? I have pins here holding my little overlap in place. I went ahead and evened up the front and the back, and then I have a pin holding the back. Well, I didn't even that up all the way, so I need to go in there and straighten that up. But next thing I want to show you is, again, how I'm going to finish up my garment. I'm adding a really, really long tie to the bottom of this. It's really hard for me to video, so I made a mock-up, and I'm going to show you with this mock-up that's much shorter, okay? So I have my two pieces put together, right sides together, and I went ahead and sewed that with my zigzag stitch, and I also serged it, okay? What my top is going to look like is very similar to this, okay? This is what I'm calling a tie on the end of the garment, except for mine is extremely long. The way that you get this look, okay, I'm going to take this seam and I'm going to make this my side seam, okay? I'm going to fold it down. And actually, sorry, I'm going to do right sides together, okay? So just follow me on this. Right sides together. So all you're going to see are the raw ends. I'm going to line it up with my side seam. So this is going to run directly into the side seam of my garment. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a pin there to hold it. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to fold it, okay? Right sides together. And I'm going to just carefully, I'm not pulling it, I'm just going to carefully go all the way around to my other side seam. And instead of putting a pin in here to hold it, I'm just going to put a pin only on the tie, okay? Only on the tie, and that is what's going to line up with my side seam, okay? Then I'm just going to throw a pin in there to hold it because I want to do the same thing with my front. I'm going to take that tie, right sides together. You're just kind of doing this with your hand for now, but you are going to sew that together. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm putting a slight, just a fold in there, folding it in half, making sure it's even. And I'm going to meet my other part of my tie. So I'm lining that up with the side seam. And I'm just going to take a pin and I'm going to put that in there. Okay, again, only on the tie. So now we have two pieces meeting up at the side seam. Okay, so I'm going to take this out, the pin that I had just holding it. But I have two pins here. And I have the pin holding the tie together. Okay, right there. So you have three pins. You have one to the left of that seam here. Then you have one to the right here. What you're going to do is you're going to start at the pin on this side. You're going to stitch all the way down to the end. Turn your machine around and close off the end. Back stitch, cut. Then you're going to go to the other side and do the exact same thing. Stitch starting at that last pin. Go all the way down to the end. Maneuver, close it up at the end, okay? So basically in between these pins, okay, in between these pins, all of this is going to remain open. However, the ends are going to be stitched, okay? I already did that on my actual tie. So now I'll show you what that looks like, okay? I have it together. You see my opening here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our iron, and I already started, and we're going to just we're going to flip it out, okay? So we went into the opening. I opened it up, went in and pulled the right sides out, okay? So you can see how it's closed up. Then what we're going to do with this opening is this. When we get on our iron, if we just follow the stitches that we made to close up each of the ends, it's going to automatically give us a look similar to this, okay? It's going to fold it on both sides. It's going to be really clean, okay? And what we're going to do, lining the middle back up with our side seam, we're going to just sandwich the fabric into the tie, just like we did with our bias tape. So again, if you're looking at this part of it, the side seam, when you iron this, you're ironing down on one side, take the other layer, you're ironing down for a really clean and polished look. Then what we're going to do, we're going to grab our top. We're lining up those seams, and we're going to pin it. We're going to do that all the way back around to the other side seam. And if you look at what I'm saying, you guys, this part is already finished. The opening is for you to grab your top and put in there. And that's what's going to finish that up. Okay, so I'm about to get that done. Again, first step is going to my iron so that I can go ahead and get that really crisp fold going. Then I'm going to sandwich my top into the tie. And this top will be completely finished once I add my sleeves. So that is what you're going to see next. Until next time, you guys, I hope you enjoyed the introduction to draping course. This is only the beginning. This is a simple top that I'm doing for just beginners, but imagine the possibilities when you continue to play around with draping, the type of things that you can create.